Welcome to Mind Fitness Warriors. We are interviewing those who have gone through the deepest valleys of mental health and risen out the other side, who are here to share their raw and real stories and experiences with us and their holistic approach to a fit and healthy mind. I am honored today to be inviting in our guest speaker, who is Megan Lawrence of Jacksonville, Florida, who is joining us today with an incredible story about her journey with mental health. Megan, I am so excited to have you on here today. You are an extremely influential person, and I know that you're just sort of starting with your platform, but Megan has this beautiful Instagram page and website, and she is really working on helping people bring healing through sharing their stories of mental health and really about daily habits and ways to increase mental health and mental awareness, and just a really powerful story to be able to share with us today, as well as welcoming other people to share their mental health journeys. And I think that is so important, especially with the message we're leading here with Mind Fitness Warriors. I'm just really excited for people to be able to hear and have a way to experience your story. And so without talking more about, from my approach of how passionate I am about what you are here to offer the world, I want to give you this chance to take this platform and share and speak from your heart and share with our audience what it is you have gone through and take us through from the beginning all the way up until, where you are today and what your recovery has looked like. So the floor is yours. Please take us on your journey.
Thank you, Jen. First I just want to say thank you for having me on. It's a great honor, and I'm not going to apologize for crying if I do cry, because I do get, just hearing myself speak can make me cry sometimes. So from start to finish, that's kind of difficult for me to have a start, just because I'm now going through the process through talk therapy and with my therapist, like doing the inner child work of where it all kind of really started. So it started from the beginning. I grew up with a really anxious mom, and she will say that as well. So I was just born into an anxious environment. I am a product of my environment. I am an only child as well. So I was a very curious child. I wasn't given the right answers, so I went and seek them for myself. So from the beginning, I was in sports from as early as I can remember. And still to this day, athletics is probably the number one part of my recovery. It's a large part of who I am. I'm trying to remove that from my identity, and it's just a part of my life. But that was kind of how I think I managed a lot of my anxiety and my depression when I was little. I had that outlet. I loved competition. I loved being a part of a team. I think mainly because I was an only child, I loved feeling that there were other people who just could understand me in a certain way, and sports was that outlet for me. I excelled from a very young age, and so I just kind of like latched onto that. Also, as an only child, I loved arts and crafts. I loved stacking my plate from an early age with just things to do. I always had to be doing something. Perfectionism, now that I'm starting to see all the symptoms of just my mental illness growing up that I was so naive to for so long. I had no idea. I thought everyone thought the same way that I did. I thought everyone experienced life the same way that I was. So I was very naive in the way that I never really understood my emotions and feelings. I spent a lot of time wanting to please other people and deal with their emotions before I dealt with mine. So I think in a large part, that's how I managed all of my relationships too. I was always the kid that wanted to make people feel better. I wanted to make people smile. I just think that there was this inherent sadness inside of me where I felt things very easily. I've always been attuned to, not to sound hippy dippy or anything like that, but vibes, very big on that. And I think that's just, at first I always thought that was a weakness. And now in my recovery, I'm starting to see that that has always been a strength, and I was just directing it in the wrong way. So my childhood, it's hard for me to label that as like a mental health struggle, because at the time that was just the situation. Like, I had no idea that what I was feeling was something to be alarmed about. I had other ways to manage it too, with my athletics and the arts and crafts. And I always had a pet or a dog. Those were a large part of my childhood, and just having that connection with something other than myself to remind me that I'm not alone. So the first time that I started really experiencing panic attacks was when I was in track and field all throughout high school. But I thought that that was normal. I thought that that was just stress. I was very good at track, but because I was so in my head, it took on something else entirely. It was no longer about the competition. It was, what's going to happen if I don't beat this time, or what's going to happen if I can't be better than who I was yesterday. It became this level of, I just put myself to a standard that was just hard on myself. Even as like a middle schooler and high schooler, I look back now and I'm like, man, I've always had this level of pressure that I've put on myself. And why did I do that? Why was I always looking to just achieve, cross things off a list? There always had to be something. It was never just a normal day. It was, there was just projects and just things that I had to be doing to stay sane in a way. I don't think that that's what I recognized it as back then, but yeah, looking back, it's just, I can see where all of the behaviors were and just went just unrecognized. We did it in my household and in my family in general. We just kind of went along with that belief of, if we don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. So a lot of the feelings that I was feeling were all internalized. I had this whole world inside of me that I was scared to address or bring to light, because that was weakness. If there was something wrong with you, well, can you deal with it? Like, can you move on? Like, there wasn't really a solution. It was just, I'm going to keep this to myself because I know that it's going to bother someone else if I bring my own emotions to the light. So that was just kind of where I developed that behavior of, I'm going to try to do what I can to not feel what I want to feel and kind of just feel for other people. And that's when I just really started taking on this unnecessary pressure on myself to be this, I don't know, empathetic person that no one else was asking of me. I just felt the need to deal with my emotions that way, not really dealing with them at all. I started drinking at a young age, not heavily. I was someone who was very curious, again, with all aspects of life. So I think my first drink, I was around 12, and then I started smoking pot when I was 14. And all of that just became, anytime something was offered to me, I would take it. Like there wasn't at the time a specific addiction that I latched onto. It was any type of feeling, or if I knew I was going to take something and it was going to give me a different type of feeling, I was on board. Like, yeah, sign me up. So drugs really started to escalate and just get worse and worse as I got older. But again, I always had athletics to really pull me back down to earth. And that was ultimately my number one goal. I knew that I was on track for something. I quit track and field, not to segue into that completely. The word itself just brought me back. But I knew that I was on track to be an athlete of some sort. Like, college for sports was not a far reach. Like, that was something I knew that I could do. Academics was something I always excelled in. I loved just being good at everything. That was what fulfilled me, was just knowing that I could bring something home. I had something to prove that I was of value. Like, if I had something to put to my name that said that I was good at something, then I would go wholeheartedly into that. And that's how I've been with sports and academics. So just, again, that was another thing to add to my plate. It wasn't until I went to college that I really started to see that there may be a difference in my behaviors compared to other kids. Yes, people went to college and they they did the whole binge drinking thing. But for me, it seemed to be something else entirely. It wasn't, I'm drinking to be the life of the party. It was, I'm drinking because it allows me to escape this feeling that I couldn't explain. Like I always felt just out of place in a way. And I definitely learned that drugs and alcohol were plentiful in college, and it wasn't a reason for people to think that my behavior was abnormal because that's what everyone was doing. So I really found, and so I did go to college for soccer. And I was able to manage it all really well. I was always told from the beginning that you have soccer, so you must, they always gave us this triangle. It was like a social life, athletics, and academics, and you can only pick two. And in my head, I was like, challenge accepted. I'm going to do it all. I'm going to balance this life of, I don't know, I still wanted to be that college student, but at the same time, I also thrived on being that college athlete. I have consumed so much of my life around just things that labeled me in a way. I loved being the athlete. I loved being the creative person. I loved being the person that excelled in school. And if those things were removed from me in any way, then I lost myself in a way. And that was what happened with me in college. Soccer wasn't going the way that I wanted to. I did it up until my junior year, until eventually I did get kicked off from my drug addiction with amphetamines. That wasn't the cause. The cause was I stopped showing up for practice. My sleeping schedule was really weird. Because the amphetamines, I would stay up all night, and then eventually you could just start to see like my lack of care for so many things. It wasn't me. But before that, I started clashing heads with my soccer coach. We didn't see eye to eye. Something that I had always excelled in since I was able to kick a ball was something I was no longer being seen for as the top athlete. I was now being put on the bench to watch people play and not being able to go out on the field and do the thing that that was my passion for my whole life. And so when that was taken away from me, it was taken away from me in a sense that I felt like I was no longer that person. So I started looking towards other things. I remember my sophomore year, I came home and told my parents that I was quitting soccer. I couldn't do it anymore. I left practice crying every single day. It wasn't fun for me anymore. Unfortunately, that was what was paying for most of, and aside from academics, that was what was paying for my school. So my parents had a large incentive to convince me to keep doing it. And I heard them out. I told them that I would give it another year, but even in between that sophomore year and junior year, I remember going to different recruiting places for the military. I was looking for anything to feel a part of a team again. And because I wasn't getting that from my college experience, it sent me into the beginning of my deepest depression. I think I think it's always been there. I think it's been there inherently. Just anxiety and depression kind of go hand in hand with each other. And that's kind of what my childhood sums up to be. But as far as like a major episode, that was when I really started to go downhill, because I started over. And because soccer was so much of my identity and I felt like it was no longer who I was anymore, I was just desperate to latch onto something else. And that's when my eating disorder really started. And that's when it started with a passion for weight training. Which turned into an eating disorder and abuse with amphetamines and speed and anything that would get my heart rate going. But it did originally start as a passion for weightlifting. And then it got to the point where the numbers that I was reaching weren't good enough. And then it became, oh, well, I can fit in another workout at this time of day. And it became this vicious cycle of, how many times can I work out today, and how much food do I need to eat to just remain at even? Like I was in a large calorie deficit by the end of it. I was taking these drugs that weren't making me hungry. So I was working out almost 3 times a day, not getting enough nutrients. And that started that started a whole new chapter of my life. And that really was, I think, a really big eye opener for me. Not so much at the time, but definitely to my athletic trainers. I got pulled aside and told that I wasn't going to be able to play on the field anymore if I didn't gain my weight back. And to me, I was so naive to what was really going on that I saw it as a healthy thing. I didn't see it as overtraining or an eating disorder. I saw it as I wanted to be healthy. So why aren't you letting me do that? I would look myself in the mirror and I liked what I look like, but now I compare myself to pictures back then and I'm just like, wow, I just visibly look so sick. And it's just amazing to me, like how you can just ignore that at the time, like, and how obvious it was to so many people around me. And I was just like, no, I like what I look like. Like, why is this a problem? I feel happy, but I wasn't. And that turned, once I realized that, food has always been kind of a weird relationship, and it still is kind of a battle, but I think everyone kind of has that battle, especially as women. We all go through that self-image, society, just all the pressures we feel to look a certain way. But I've definitely been an extremist in the way that it's always all or nothing with me. From passion to self-destructive tendencies, it's always one or the other. I'm in or I'm out. So I don't think I truly realized that I had an issue with mental illness until a few months after my suicide attempt. I didn't even realize at the time that even correlated. I thought I was in a sad place, and by removing the drugs and alcohol that I was abusing in my life, if I removed those things, then that meant that my world was going to change. And it did for a while. But it wasn't until I started asking myself those questions, like, why did I drastically resort to a suicide attempt? Like, what were the signs before then? And now through my therapy, I've done the work, and well, not all of it, but I've done the work to see what all of those signs were. And it's just amazing to me still how naive we are, or how easily justifiable our actions are to us during those times where we really are just wanting to be happy. And by resorting to some self-destructive tendencies and whatever it is that we latched onto to help cope with our mental illness, it feels right at that time. So yeah, it's just ever since the attempt has really been, I was 23 at the time. I'm 26 now. I moved back home with my parents. I called it blue collar rehab. And that part of my life was necessary. I lived in denial of it for the first, I think, year and a half, just because I was just really shameful that I had to move back home. I took a lot of pride in being an independent person, which is also very funny to think too, because I'm also a very codependent person. So I wasn't really independent until about probably this past year. I've just always kind of thought I was an independent person, maybe because I was an only child, or I've always done things on my own. So I classified that as independent, but I wasn't. It's just been this process of learning all of these tendencies that I've developed over time, and all of these patterns that I just was wired with, and just through observed behavior as well as learned behavior. And it was only a matter of time until that happened. That wasn't my first rock bottom. My first rock bottom was before I got kicked off the soccer team. I was arrested for a DUI. At that time, drinking was the least of my concerns. That at that time, that was when amphetamines really were taking over my life. And so when I did get arrested, I was like, oh, that was the rock bottom I needed to snap me out of that pill addiction. So I got rid of those, but everything else in my life was justified because I thought that was the problem. And then a couple years went by after that, and the binge drinking, and I graduated from college, and all of my friends were moving on with their life. And I was like, I don't want to. Like, I was in the bartending scene. I was very much a part of that work life, but then play harder. And I played harder. And I got this weird, I just developed this love for being that life of the party when really I wasn't the life of the party. I was just, people liked the energy that I was bringing to wherever it is that I was, but deep down I was just trying to avoid the person that I really wanted to become, which is who I'm working towards now. It's just kind of crazy to look back on all of the different parts of my life that should have been clear signs that were just ignored or brushed under the rug because God forbid I had asked for help. That was never something that I ever wanted to do. Asking for help was a weakness. So I just avoided it. It's not a weakness at all. It's one of the strongest things you can do in your life. So just in my recovery now, I would say ever since I moved away from home, I was at home for about 2 years of my sobriety so far. And I've been on my own for a year now. And that has been a complete new process for me, just because it's a clear reminder that mental health and the mental illness is still there. No matter where you are in your recovery, it is a part of your everyday life. I think I kind of got this whole idea of, okay, I realized what it is that I'm struggling with, so you can go away now. And I wake up every single day having to remind myself that, oh, that's not the case. Some days are good, some days are bad, and it's just a matter of reminding yourself of those key parts of your recovery that have helped you get to where you are today. And reminding myself that I'm not the person that I was 5 years ago. I'm that person who I've made myself become since then.
No, that is amazing. I mean, I think just with everything you've shared, I feel like it's definitely what, especially, youth going into college, going through to, we've got a lot of high school students that are just ending their years right now and are about to enter that new stage in their life. And this is a hard time. I mean, I work with the Canadian Mental Health Association. I do volunteer work and working in some schools, and I see these kids, and you can see where they are right now, and those anxieties about starting these new chapters, and everything you talked about, it's so relatable on so many levels, right? And we all have such a unique journey, but there's so much to hear that can be relatable for so many people. And with my particular journey, I was definitely the sabotage with alcohol. It was my only escape. It was the only way I could feel like a different person. And I can relate some of those pieces. Now with your journey, what do you feel kind of came first? Because you talked a lot about getting into, you got into drugs, you got into pill addictions, you got into the alcohol, and, realized that you went from being a top athlete to benched. Did you feel that there was kind of one thing that led to the other, or did you start getting into the drugs and alcohol because of your addiction for being, perfect, or being, the top athlete? Or did the athletics start to fall and you picked up the abuse, the substance abuse, because of that?
I definitely think that the drug abuse and the drinking itself just stemmed from a place where I was trying to escape to. At the time, I didn't tie two and two together. I definitely think when the realization that I was not the athlete that I was going to be, or that I saw for myself in college, that was definitely a huge factor in me increasing my destructive tendencies. The destructive tendencies were always there, but I definitely think that was I can point to that moment in my life, and I can truly say that was the first time where I had to remove myself from that identity of being this athlete that I had just consumed my whole life as. So I took it as like my whole world came crashing down in a way, because I was like, who am I? I had no idea. And so I think I was latching on to people. I mean, gosh, I've gone through just my sexual escapades and just all of it. It all stems from just thinking that I can use people or drugs to cure whatever's inside, when really that's just a temporary fix, and it doesn't last longer than, less than 24 hours. It's a fleeting feeling, and it's not getting down to the root cause. But I definitely think that the realization that soccer was not for me, or not that it wasn't for me, but that it wasn't all of me, was really life shattering at the time. I wasn't able to cope with it properly, for sure.
And what would you, if you heard that, there was this 18, 19-year-old that was just starting this similar journey, what would be your advice for them? What would you tell them, or what would you tell the 18, 19-year-old Megan today if you had that chance?
I would say that you're a student before you're an athlete. So don't lose yourself in the bigger picture, which is if I'm speaking specifically to a student who is transitioning to play sports in college, it is a completely different lifestyle, because you pretty much factor your whole day around that sport. So that was kind of my life. But I mean, what I would tell just anyone going into college is don't put so much pressure on yourself to be a certain way because you've been that way for a certain amount of time. And that to me was just, I've always latched on to routine, and there's definitely OCD throughout that's definitely a coping mechanism of me. There's patterns, routines, and stuff that I still kind of partake in today. It's definitely, I'm more aware of it, but don't consume yourself with a certain identity. Find who you are in college. That's ultimately what it is for, is finding who you are in college, but don't lose yourself in the process of realizing that you aren't the way that you may have thought you were.
Amazing. And what would you say, if you were to leave like your final nuggets for our audience, like what would you say are some of the key, maybe like your top 2 or 3 key techniques or tools that you have used in your recovery that has, gifted you that positive and holistic approach to gaining that more fit and healthy mind that, that you're experiencing now?
I definitely still exercise. I do remind myself to take off days, because I can get back into that unhealthy way of feeling, if I have a bad meal, those negative thoughts of, oh, you ate that thing earlier, you might want to punish yourself in the gym later. And it's the realization now that I have of that, just recognizing that thought for what it is, and just knowing that that's not who you are. And knowing that eating something bad is just you living your life. We specifically talking to people who do struggle with those kind of thoughts when it comes revolved around food and working out. That one's hard to wrap my mind around, because it's hard for me to, put that one into words. But so going back to your original question, let's just go with, I work out daily. I work on my mind. I work on my body. I like pushing myself in a physical sense. I don't go hard every day. It's more about maintenance and consistency, and just reminding myself that I can be strong. I love the feeling of leaving a gym and knowing that I left it, like I did that for me. I didn't do that for anyone else. I just went in there and I busted my butt on the things that I wanted to work on. And at the end of the day, that's something I can take pride in, and it starts to show. I just get just the endorphins that you get from it. Really is just that natural antidepressant that you get that certain medications can't give you. Other than the gym, I would say journaling. There's nothing I love more than, I shouldn't say nothing I love more. There are some days where I avoid journaling because I know that I'm putting something off that I'm feeling currently. And I know once I sit down and write it down on paper, I can't help it come out of me. It comes out of me in a way that talking about it is so much different. There's a certain level of authenticity that comes out when you're journaling, that even when you go back and reread it, you're like, wow, I do have good insight. And you'll start to see that there is this very rational part to your mental illness that knows that the thoughts that you're thinking and all of those things might seem crazy. So when you see it down on paper, you can just start to see like, oh, I can control this. I'm not that person that my thoughts keep telling me that I am. I know that I can overcome this. And just seeing the results of my true feelings through my writing has been so eye-opening to me and who I am really as a person. Because if I listen to
my dog in the background is saying, and don't forget about me, because I'm a huge part of your recovery, and I'm going to keep shaking my collar until you say something.
He is. Pele. His name's Pele, like the soccer player. He is. Dogs have been throughout my life, so he definitely is a huge part. One of my favorite times of day is waking up early and going on a long walk with him. Not because I know that I'm doing that because he needs to go out and go to the bathroom, but because it's just a great way to start my day. Like I get to start it with a long, refreshing walk and really just get my thoughts in line for what is to come in this next 24 hours that I'm given, and try not to think so hard about the 24 hours after that and the 24 hours after that.
I love it. I actually love that. That's like the perfect way to wrap up is, what am I doing with these 24 hours I've been given? I think that was a very powerful statement because this is such a gift, right? It's such a gift to wake up. It's a gift to have this day and to do all the amazing things that we can do with it. And so I think that is so important to remember, and journaling can really help with that side of it too, right? Is to start that morning with those grateful affirmations and knowing what it is that we're walking into that we're so blessed to have today. So Megan, I am so thankful for you coming on here and just sharing your heart and sharing your journey and what you've been through and just everything you've been able to just share with the audience about how you've your recovery process, but what the deepest sides of your mental health brought you. But it's also given you your greatest gift. It's given you the gift to be able to share this message with other people, especially youth that are going through what you've already been through, and now you've come out the other side of that, and some of the things that you use on that daily basis just to keep that balance. So I will pop up your credits here so where people can connect with you, but you have your amazing Instagram page, which is just filled with just wonderful messages. And I love your Insta stories, and you have such an amazing following. So that's in my own words. You just have such great little tidbits there. And then which is all linked to your website as well, which is Healing Hopeful. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And, everyone out there, don't forget to subscribe so that you can catch all these amazing episodes as they launch weekly. Thank you so much again, Megan.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. We'll see you soon.